That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, every single season, there's a player that the Dynasty Fantasy Football community feels like we all have to hate this one guy. We all have to say that, oh, he's overrated, he's overvalued, and you have to push him down further than where he's going in NFL drafts and your Dynasty rookie drafts. I mean, the most recent example of this is Kadarius Toney going in the first round. And of course, I mean, you have just him going in the late second in Dynasty rookie drafts. I'm getting this same feel with Chris Olave. I mean, it's very early on in the process. Of course, there's still a lot of digging to be done. But at this point, I mean, the Dynasty Fantasy Football community, it's like a boys club here. I mean, if you want to know the password is Chris Olave's overrated. I'm going to be talking about why I don't think that may be true. And I think a lot of people are just jumping on to the same base level of analysis. And I want to take a little bit of a deeper dive into Chris Olave and talk about why I think possibly he can become a value in Dynasty Fantasy Football rookie drafts. But of course, before we get into anything, please go down there, drop a like on this video, leave a comment letting me know why I am so stupid and how everything I said in this video is wrong. You know, I love reading those comments, and also subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. I mean, if you're watching this video because you want to listen to a little bit about Chris Olave, then sure, this video can help you out. But I mean, on this channel, you're only going to find Dynasty Fantasy Football content all off season. Let me go and also give a shout out to the flock on Patreon. Over there on Patreon, if you want to support this channel, you get access to Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings. You can get into a Dynasty Fantasy Football league with us, get an in-depth podcast breaking down your own Dynasty team. I mean, there's so much stuff going on Patreon. Y'all all know that by now. The description has those links for you. Now let's dive into Chris Olave. And this is a wide receiver that, yes, I mean, there are a couple red flags. The storyline is obviously he goes back his senior season at Ohio State. Obviously, that's going to be the main thing that people focus in on is that senior season, because going into 2021, this was supposed to be one of the best wide receivers in the country. This was supposed to be someone that everybody was looking out for, and he was at the top of rankings. A lot of people thought he was going to come out in that 2020 draft class. Maybe he should have, based on how his senior season played out. But overall, this is going to be a wide receiver that I don't want to say he is skinny, but he's 6'1", 188 pounds. That's what he's currently listed at, according to Ohio State. And of course, we are going to actually want to see him at the NFL Combine. You know that 9 times out of 10, when we're talking about these wide receivers, I mean, we go through and we look at someone like Treylon Burks. I mean, we look at someone like Drake London. We say, we already have such a good idea of the production profile here. This player doesn't necessarily need that elite athletic profile to win at the next level. But every single season, there are wide receivers that are supposedly going to come in and win with speed. I mean, right now, it's rumored, and of course, this rumor has no legs to it. We'll actually see what the real number is when we get to the NFL Combine, but it's rumored that Chris Olave is going to run a 4.38 40-yard dash. And I mean, if you're 6'1", 188 pounds, you probably should be a little bit more of a speed wide receiver. I mean, this is what we saw going back, say, with someone like Dymie Brown in 2021. With Dymie Brown coming out of UNC, you looked at him in college and you said, okay, this was a wide receiver that won with speed. He won as a field stretching wide receiver that got behind the safeties consistently. If he's going to do that at the NFL level, you need to see him have, I mean, a very fast 40-yard dash time. You need to see him be one of the faster wide receivers at the NFL Combine. And the 40-yard dash actually matters for someone like him. Another great example of this is James Washington coming out of OSU in that 2018 draft class. So when we don't see those wide receivers who supposedly win with speed, they come in and they're a little bit slower than expected. They actually get knocked down in my rankings a considerable amount. And I mean, the complete opposite end of the spectrum is going over to someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was coming out of USC. I mean, once we saw him at his pro day run, I mean, a pitiful 40-yard dash time, everybody in the Dynasty Fantasy Football community started to panic, and I was sitting here going, this doesn't matter at all. I mean, wide receivers like Keenan Allen, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, these guys that are slot wide receivers that are running closer to the line of scrimmage that don't really profiled to be deep threats, you don't need to see speed with them. I mean, the minimum speed threshold that we have for wide receivers coming into the NFL is going to be a 4.60, but with those slot guys, it honestly doesn't really matter. And with those field stretching options like Chris Olave and how he may profile, you actually need to see that speed. So Chris Olave is going to be a player. I want to see his weight at the NFL Combine. I also would like to see that 40-yard dash time. But of course, the meat of the analysis in 9 50% of what we need to pay attention to is going to be the production that we had at Ohio State. And of course, not only the production that we had at Ohio State, we talk about this all the time, but the most important thing from a dynasty fantasy football perspective and evaluating these rookies coming into the NFL is going to be their production profile. But of course, it's not as simple as putting some numbers in on a spreadsheet and going, okay, 1 + 1 = 2. Here, Treylon Burks, the wide receiver 1, Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver. No, it's not that simple. You have to look into the context behind it. You have to just contextualize that production and really understand where you stack up. If you're playing, at Ohio State and you have Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith-Ignigba also in that offense versus if you're playing at, Arkansas and you're Treylon Burks. Now, of course, we have Treylon Burks at wide receiver 1. We'll talk about where we have Chris Olave in our rankings a little bit later on. But to go through, look at Chris Olave. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school. We've talked about this before. You actually kind of want to see highly ranked high school recruits at the running back position, but wide receiver, it really doesn't matter. We did that in-depth study, and really there's not much correlation at all between high school recruit rank at the wide receiver position and NFL success. It doesn't matter that he was a 3-star, but maybe just knowing that he was a 3-star prospect going to Ohio State, it can help us contextualize his freshman season at Ohio State. He was extremely young, where, right now, he's 21 years old, and he's not going to be 22 until pretty much the start of the NFL season. So that's one thing I do want to point out is when we're going year by year, he is a much younger true freshman than what you'd have with someone else. Here, say David Bell's the perfect example. David Bell is only about 4 months older than Chris Olave, but David Bell is coming out after his junior season. Chris Olave is coming out after his senior year. So if we go through and we talk about his true freshman season here, Chris Olave is playing this year at 17 years old, if my math is correct. And of course, I'm no mathematician, but it looks like he's playing this possibly at 17 years old, and he was a 3-star prospect. So you're not expecting early career production for Chris Olave. Of course, you would love to see early career production, as that does translate well to fantasy production at the next level. But here he did average 28 receiving yards a game, which is nothing in the context of this offense. This offense was so damn productive that only accounts for 7.8% of the receiving yards. And you had some pretty notable names in this offense. You had Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, wasn't that productive at Ohio State. He was definitely pigeonholed into a role that didn't really matter. Then you also had Paris Campbell. Remember Paris Campbell getting selected in the 2nd round of the NFL draft to the Indianapolis Colts out of Ohio State in 2019. He was a great wide receiver coming out of college. The issue is he just couldn't stay healthy at the next level. And then you have KJ Hill as well. Not going to lie, did not know much about KJ Hill. Did a little bit of research, but this was a wide receiver that was actually a 4-star guy going to Ohio State. And what's important is he's actually on the Los Angeles Chargers roster right now. So you had 3 NFL quality wide receivers for Chris Olave stepping into this Ohio State offense. And as a 17-year-old true freshman, of course he's not going to produce. There's no way in hell you could expect a 17-year-old 3-star guy coming in and outproducing Terry McLaurin, who's 3 years older than him. But his sophomore year, this is when some targets open up, because as we said, you had Paris Campbell. In that 2019 NFL draft class, you had Terry McLaurin in that 2019 NFL draft class as well. So in 2019 on the roster, you have a true freshman, Garrett Wilson. You have KJ Hill, as we've discussed. This is now a wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. Not a great option, but still, last year, a big conversation point was, remember, Rashad Bateman coming out of, I believe, Minnesota. He actually had Tyler Johnson on that same roster, and a lot of people want to say, oh, Tyler Johnson was there. He was blocking Rashad Bateman. Well, hey, if we can talk about Tyler Johnson, you can talk about KJ Hill here. But nonetheless, his true sophomore year at, 18 years old, if my math is correct, he comes through and he averages about 65 receiving yards per game. And if you contextualize that to the offense, that actually was about 24.5% of the passing yards on a per game basis for the Ohio State offense went to Chris Olave, which that is a good mark at 18 years old. Obviously at a dominant program. Here, Garrett Wilson, keep in mind, Garrett Wilson was a true freshman rather than a true sophomore. He came through and he had 33 receiving yards per game. Now, what's funny to see is Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Let me go through and double check this, because this seems like there's no way it can be right. Let me look this up as we're making this video. But it looks like they're damn near identical with their birthdays. Let's see. It looks like they're identical with their age. Yeah. You actually have Chris Olave as a player that's 1 month older than Garrett Wilson here. I think that's something that a lot of people are missing out on. I think a lot of people are missing out on the fact that Chris Olave, while yes, he stays all 4 years at Ohio State. His true freshman year, he was 17 years old. So at 18 years old, he comes out, has a full-on breakout for Ohio State on a team that had some talent. You have Garrett Wilson at the same exact age with half the production. And then going to his true junior season, of course, this is his peak. This is the peak of his powers. He comes out and, I mean, he is pretty dominant. He's 21 years old this season, starts it at 20, but nonetheless, he has 104 receiving yards per game, which sounds great and everything, 104 receiving yards per game. But if that's in the context of an offense that, say, has 365 passing yards a game, who the hell cares? I mean, 100 receiving yards per game is not getting you much there. But this Ohio State offense wasn't nearly that productive. I mean, that actually accounted for damn near 40% of the passing yards on a per game basis in 2020 went to Chris Olave. If you compare this to Garrett Wilson, who is the same age, Garrett Wilson was at 34.5%. Now, if you go and also look at Jamison Williams, a wide receiver that people want to get excited about, and right now is projecting to be a first-round draft pick out of Alabama. Of course, he transferred over to Alabama, but in this offense, he had 25.7 receiving yards on a per-game basis. So Chris Olave, he came out and he was dominant at Ohio State. He was dominant at Ohio State with almost 40% of his team's passing yards on a per-game basis. I mean, as an extremely young wide receiver as well. I know it's his true junior season, but nonetheless, you can almost view this as a true sophomore year with how young he is. He's the same age as Garrett Wilson. Now, the issue with Chris Olave, and of course, why everybody wants to come through and why everybody wants to talk about him being an overrated wide receiver in Dynasty, and why you're seeing a lot of people rank guys like David Bell over him, is the fact that his final season at Ohio State, when you are a senior, you are expected to be dominant. I mean, going back to what we had with Devontae Smith in college last year. Like, remember Devontae Smith? Everybody wanted to talk about the fact that, yeah, if you looked at his production, it was great, but it was in the context of him, I mean, being a fourth-year player at Alabama. And if you compare that to Rashad Bateman, who's only 20 years old, a lot of people want to say, oh, ignore the production for Smith, ignore the production for Smith. And it didn't really matter that he came out and he had he had 1,800 receiving yards and he had 23 receiving touchdowns off of 13 games. I mean, a lot of people wanted to discount that production with Devontae Smith because when you come back your senior season, the expectation is you're dominant, and anything less than that, people are not going to really put up with. Now, with Chris Olave, that did not happen. He came back, and in 2021, he was very disappointing. In 2021, he came through and he had 85 receiving yards on a per game basis. What's even worse is not only did his receiving yardage go down, not only did his receiving statistics across the board go down, but there was more passing volume in this offense than there previously was. So his totals go down, and the percentage of the offense he accounts for, I mean, craters. He goes from seeing about 40% of the passing yards on a per game basis at Ohio State to now closer to about 23%. Yeah, that is bad. Chris Olave had a very bad final year. But let's go through, let's continue to contextualize this. Now, Garrett Wilson comes out. He has 96 receiving yards on a per game basis. So yes, he does surpass Chris Olave this season. Now, like we said, Garrett Wilson, a true junior here. And when you're a true junior, you're not going to be expected to go out there and outproduce a senior that's going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So, of course, Garrett Wilson, I mean, I have him ranked above Chris Olave, but let's keep in mind, they're the same age here. It's not, I mean, massive swing in that you're looking at a 22-year-old being less productive than a 20-year-old. That's not the thing. They're both 21. They're both the same exact age in this season. Now, you also had Jackson Smith Ignigba, who we've kind of referenced at the beginning of the video, coming out and crushing. He was actually the wide receiver that led this team in receiving yards on a per-game basis. Some background on Jackson Smith. This is the guy that you really want to hold out hopes for. This is the guy that looks like he is going to be dominant when he gets to the NFL. That's not to speak negatively on either Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, but Jackson, he is a beast. He was a 5-star prospect coming out, and as a true sophomore here, so younger than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, he had 105 receiving yards on a per-game basis, 20 receiving yards more on a per-game basis than Chris Olave. So, of course, this was a disappointing season from Olave, and of course, you should move him down your rankings because of so. And like we already said, we are going to want to see the NFL Combine with Chris Olave. This is one of the very few wide receivers that I think the Combine will actually matter with. I want to see what his weight is. I want to make sure this isn't a Devonta Smith type scenario where he's coming in weighing 175 pounds. And at the same time, we want to make sure this is a wide receiver that has at least I want to call it, I mean, in the 4-4s. Like if he runs a 4-4-5, I'm completely fine with it. Just please don't come out here and run a 4-5-8 or something and embarrass yourself. But with Chris Olave, if we're talking our Dynasty rankings, you can go through and you can look at almost any set of Dynasty rankings, and every single person will have Chris Olave behind David Bell. And I mean, we just talked about David Bell in another video. And I mean, we went through and we were saying, you know what, that's probably not something we want to do. After diving into Chris Olave a little bit deeper, I definitely don't think you should have David Bell over him. As if you're looking at Chris Olave, I mean, his true junior season at a younger age than David Bell, 40% of the Ohio State offense alongside Garrett Wilson. And if you're looking at David Bell compared to this, I mean, David Bell as a junior had 34% of his offense at a slightly older age, and he didn't have Garrett Wilson in that same offense. I will definitely say that. So I know the true junior season in 2021 was a little bit concerning here, but another thing that I really want to look at, and I know people are tired of hearing me talk about this, and running back, it's everything. Quarterback, it's everything. Wide receiver, tight end, it doesn't matter nearly as much, but it still does matter. NFL draft capital. I think if you're looking at the production profile from Chris Olave, and you can go through and you can just talk yourself into the fact that it may be more impressive than what you had with David Bell. I know it doesn't look super pretty on paper, but you have to look at the context behind the production here. If you just look at the numbers, you're not going to get there. You have to look at the context of the offense because he's playing at Ohio State. He's not playing at Purdue. I think you can talk yourself into the production profile being just as good, if not better. Not only that, he's supposed to be a better athlete. Not only that, but Chris Olave right now, if you're looking at NFLmockdraftdatabase.com, and like I said, this is not a perfect tool. Like I said, I mean, also, by the way, don't think they're sponsoring these videos or anything. This is just something I found online. But what they do is they go through and they account for every mock draft you can find online, and they just kind of create an ADP of sorts and say, okay, maybe this is the range we can expect these wide receivers. This is going to dramatically shift as we go through the offseason. But right now they have Chris Olave projected for pick 18, only behind Garrett Wilson in the NFL draft. And you have David Bell, I mean, someone that's projected as a late second. You have Dotson as well. I mean, I know a lot of people want to put Dotson ahead of Olave. I don't get that as well. Of course, we'll be talking about Dotson in a video very soon. Don't even try to talk yourself into going Jamison Williams over him. I think that Chris Olave here has a strong argument to be made as the wide receiver 4 in this draft. And I know that we talked previously in our video about Drake London as wanting our wide receiver rankings as Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Drake London in a top tier of their own as those 3 wide receivers. I don't know if I can put Chris Olave in that same tier. However, I think what we're probably going to do is we're going to have that tier of those top 3 wide receivers. Then we're going to have Chris Olave at his own tier in tier 4. I don't think I would consider having Dotson or David Bell over him. And I know a lot of other people would. But please let me know what your thoughts are down there in the comment section. Go down there, drop a like in the video, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. We'll be getting out, some new Dynasty leagues over there on Patreon. We'll actually have a ton of openings for those Dynasty leagues on Patreon, but I think that should be it. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I really hope you have a great day, and I hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.